Welcome to Kindred. Today we're talking with Kathy Myers and Willow Dutke-Tepper from the Family and Home Network, one of our nonprofit partners who recently took on Wikipedia's definition of stay-at-home mom. Wikipedia's definition was housewife, and without the long economic history of how unpaid work of all caregivers makes capitalism possible. So we're going to listen to Kathy and Willow today tell us the story about how they discovered the page, how they corrected it, and how is that working out, because Wikipedia is accessible to the public and can be updated by anyone. We'll see how that's going. So welcome, Willow. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
So Kathy, Family and Home Network has been around for 40 years, and I'd just like to hear a little bit about how did you discover this definition of stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home mother as a housewife? I don't think they had that definition up for stay-at-home dads or parents.
I stumbled on it somehow, and when I saw it, I thought, what? Because it just said stay-at-home mother at the top, and then it said redirect to housewife. So there's a full article about housewife. Then I looked, and there is a stay-at-home father page, there's a stay-at-home parent page, there's a working parent page. And I just thought, oh, we have to do something about this. But, we're a tiny nonprofit. We don't have any staff, the paid staff. And I kept putting it on a to-do list and saying, we have to do this, we have to do this. So like last fall, we hadn't done it yet. And Willow joined the board, and we were all talking at a board meeting about it's our 40th anniversary. What should we do for a 40th anniversary project? And I said, how about that Wikipedia page? And I think that was the first Willow had ever heard of it. And she was like, what? So she said, I'll take that on. So it was perfect. It was great. So that's how we got it done, is Willow took it on and found out what needed to be done. And then we worked back and forth. We edited with several board members too, participating over a period of months, and of course relying on the 40 years of knowledge that our organization has built up over all this time.
So there wasn't a definition there. There was a redirect to housewife.
Right. So it was basically a blank page. What is a stay-at-home mother? Actually, I think when I look at the history on the page, I think a couple of brave souls had tried to put a little definition in, but their definition was just very, very short and kind of, how you can be kind of like positive, like this is what stay-at-home mother, and I don't even remember what the original ones were, but they were taken down and this redirect held. So we knew we had to put something meaty in there that was making a statement like, we are here. This is stay-at-home mothers exist. We need to be respected. We're doing work that's equivalent. And no, we asked the question, like, if it's care, when a child care provider takes care of a child all day and feeds them and changes them, does it then become non-work because a parent does it? So, there were a lot of layers of complexity to this.
And it is a meaty definition. And I really appreciate the time that you took to put in all of the economic pieces. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And I just want everybody to hang in there with us, because this is a really, really important phrase: stay-at-home mother, stay-at-home mom. Just by the fact that right now, 57% of mothers are cycling in and out of being at home, being at work, being at home, being at work, because they can't afford to work most of the time. It's what most of them are saying. And the choice, as you had said earlier, Kathy, before we got started recording, it's not a choice. So Willow, do you want to tell us, I would like, first of all, to hear a little bit about your story, because you are a stay-at-home mother of 2 young children, and you were the one that took this on.
Sure. So a little bit about my background. It was kind of a natural fit for me to take this on. My job prior to this was as a writer and a journalist. So when Kathy mentioned there was a writing project, I was just waiting for her to ask. And I was happy when she did. So it was right down my alley. And I became a stay-at-home mother about 4.5 years ago in 2019, right before the pandemic. And obviously it was did not begin as a normal stay-at-home mother experience. You know, I was the teacher, the parent, the friend, the everything. And I think that, you know, that's really what a stay-at-home mother does, but it was, you know, without any breaks whatsoever. And I realized once we started to come out, you know, of quarantine and started to socialize, and I became known as a stay-at-home mother, just what a different role in society you play as someone who's at home. You know, questions as simple as what do you do become very hard to answer. Or, you know, it becomes small talk becomes problematic in certain ways. So I started to do a lot of research, and I started to get a little angry. And I made an Instagram account to vent my frustrations. The chief household officer, Kathy, found me there, and I was thrilled that she did. Yeah, when we got to do this project, I was just a sponge. You know, I'm still in the learning stage of getting a handle on, you know, what it means to be a mother in society and what research has been done behind that, what statistics are behind that. And doing this project was just a great learning experience for me.
Well, I noticed that you have Darshan Narvaez's book, Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, listed right at the top there, and we're excited about that. We just did an interview yesterday, Darshan and I, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of that book. It is 10 years later, and we are still unpacking it. And I always have to talk about our work at Kindred and the Evolved Nest by saying we acknowledge that we are living in a country that ranks at the bottom of 193 developed nations for family support and wellness. So we are not trying to pile on guilt for parents. We're talking about culture here. We're talking about the culture that does not acknowledge the basics of caregiving, which is acknowledged in this new book. And thank you for sharing this book with me, Kathy. Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. This book just came out, and it starts off by saying, you know, this unpaid caregiving is the engine of capitalism, the unrecognized, unpaid engine of capitalism. So we're going to try to shed some light on this unrecognized piece, and how critical through this lens getting this definition up and getting it right, again, because we have a huge chunk of our population now that are going back and forth between home and work, not because of a high-minded choice, but because they have to. So Willow, can you tell me a little bit more? We have Darsha's book is there, and it does, again, talk about culture and the needs of children. We're not centering the needs of children or anyone in this country, nurturing. How did you approach putting this definition together and the research you compiled? It's quite extensive, that long list of citations at the bottom.
Well, that was definitely a team effort with Kathy. The citations, and we both drew from books that we've read, and she's had many years of reading on this topic with, you know, the 40-year organization. But to me, the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity were sort of the same thing, which is how to represent the stay-at-home mother without any of the stigma that gets put on stay-at-home mothers from, you know, people who are perceiving us from the outside world. I mean, to me, that was really one of the most important pieces, to say, we're here, we do important work. It's not included in the GDP. The statistics are misleading. People are forced into this position. It's not always a position of privilege. There are children who have medical needs, and the parents, you know, leave their careers for that. And even when it, you know, is from a place of privilege, it still is a very, very valuable role in society that this mother is playing, or the parent is playing, really. And I think that that was one of the best and most challenging parts about writing this, was making sure that we were very, very straight and clear about the value that a mother has to society.
Kathy, what are the traps? You talk about the traps a lot, with how arguments out there culturally are centered around supporting women going to work and supporting childcare. but they're not supporting women who choose to stay at home.
Right. Well, for decades, there's been this, first of all, when people draw a line between stay-at-home mothers and working mothers, that's an inaccuracy to start with. And then, of course, there's the tendency of people to form like their own little interest groups. So sometimes women adopt like, I'm a stay-at-home mother or I'm a working mother, and they want to really identify as that and set themselves apart from the other. So there's that conflict, and the media has really played into that and made, I mean, not so much recently, but for quite a long time, there was a lot of media about the opposites of these two roles. And as you said, women move in and out of the workforce, and we knew from our own experience and from listening to parents that these were not there were not two camps, and you couldn't just divide women into these two camps. We, for a long time early on, my kids were born in the 80s, and I connected with this organization when they were a couple of years old. And we used to say to each other, and like when we talk about our choice to be at home, we have to be careful not to say this is the best choice for all families or for all women or for all children. And we would say, I believe this is the best choice for my family and for my children. And this is the choice that I make. So when I started to learn about Darsha's work and read her, and then when this book came out, The Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, it was just wonderful to have the information about children's needs and to be able to say, in order to meet my child's needs, that as shown by science, this is what I believe has to be done. And we were able to share this information with parents and let them make their own decision, of course, but say, how are you going to establish these and maintain these relationships, and all of the factor of time, which nobody wants to talk about. I mean, we talk about time in our culture with other things. It's important to have time for education. It's important to spend time on your career. It's important to spend time, in other relationships. But when it comes to parent-child time together, that's something people really shy away from talking about. And we take that on. We say we're working to help families spend generous amounts of time together, parents and children together. So we were careful in the Wikipedia article to say that people make this choice with a complex mix of factors, including their understanding of children's needs and the context of contemporary society, like what's going on in society and how do people look at if you are a professional, can you take time away from your career and go back to it? And we also track programs that make that possible. And we would like to do more of that. If we had the ability to assign an editor to write about the situations where that's more possible for people, we would love to do that. And we have a resource list where we list groups like I Relaunch, which was started by a woman who went back to work after many years away, and she helps people do that. And the National Science Foundation, I believe, has a program where they help scientists come back, because society needs women to come back after they've been home for a while. And women gain skills in being home. They learn about themselves. They learn about interpersonal relationships. They learn all kinds of things kind of on the job of being a parent that they might not learn in the workforce. Reentry is something that's, I think, spreading. More and more companies have reentry programs, and it's going to get easier for people to do that.
Can I jump off of that, Kathy? Because I think that what you said is really true. Something that I found and something that I try to say a lot is that, I mean, becoming a stay-at-home parent, I felt like I had more responsibility than I did when I was in the workforce, and I ran my own business for part of the time. I felt like it was requiring more leadership skills, more project management skills, conflict resolution, negotiation, You know, I could go on the professional skills that I feel like I gained leaving the workforce. And yet when I go back, statistically, they're going to see a hole there. You know, you need reentry help, you need professional development, you need all these things to make you valid again in a way for the job that maybe you already did for 10 years. And I think that that's something that's really overlooked, is how many professional skills are applicable when you're an active parent.
I went to a meeting it was like adjacent to the UN that was organized by some mothers groups many years ago. I went with Beverly Smith from Canada, who's an activist in at-home mothering in Canada. And I think that the people from Mothers at Home Matter too were there. And that's an organization in the UK for at-home mothers. They have great information on their website, and they do some meetings. And, you know, the internet has really changed things. I mean, we used to try to stay in touch with people by writing letters or, you know, making an occasional phone call. So the internet's made it so much easier to stay in touch. And Wikipedia is an international, you know, resource for people. So we tried really hard to be aware of that and to include the perspective of people around the world as far as we could. And Wikipedia can be edited by anybody. So we hope there'll be some positive edits by people in some of these other organizations who maybe see something that we missed and have something to add. I've been going to meetings with the Global Women's Strike for quite a while, and a lot of our work has been on family policy in the US, but we also have they also meet with women around the world, and I've attended some of those webinars that they've put on, and they talk to women in Thailand and women in all across the world. And that's been really a good education for me to hear from people, and inspiring to hear the kinds of things that women do as activists in other countries. I'm reluctant to name the other countries because I don't remember exactly which ones, but there was a women's group from South America that was on and talked about how they made their point about how important their work is. There's also a foundation called the Van Leer Foundation that we cited. They put out a publication every year called Early Childhood Matters, and they've done really interesting work on caregiving. They did an article about in Colombia, in Bogota, I think, they established care blocks where they had centers where people from the neighborhood caregivers could come from the neighborhood, not only caregivers of children, but also caregivers of disabled people and elderly, and the caregivers could come to get some support and some relief, some time off and some services. So there's, you know, it's taken a lot of time to find these things around the world, but there's some really interesting things going on.
There is. I know that when Darsha presents the Evolved Nest information, she says in parts of the world where they have all of the cultural supports in place and they value caregiving, they look at her like, yeah, thanks for the science of what we already know and what we're already doing. And then she comes to places like the US and they're developed nations, and they are like, don't tell us, we don't want to know. We don't want to, we don't, you can't tell us those things. That's too hard to hear. Babies have needs. What? No, we don't want to know about that because parents feel like they don't have the backup they need to follow the Evolved Nest, which we don't. But but it's good to know that there are other organizations out there, like you're saying, who are some of the countries that we have talked with have, 2 to 3 years. I think Germany has 3 years that you have paid leave and your job is waiting for you when you go back, and someone comes to your house and helps you fold laundry. And sometimes I feel like having a group so we can all use our active imaginations and just imagine what would that be like and try to figure out how to make that happen policy-wise for ourselves here in the United States. So,
well, and I think, I mean, the culture is an important part of it too. People's attitudes about when you walk into a store with your children, do people like shrink back as though, oh no, there's a child here, there's going to be trouble, or are people welcoming? And that is really a cultural thing that can vary quite a bit from one place to another. And in the US, sadly, it's hostile toward children in a lot of ways.
Oh, there is. There used to be the child-friendly initiative that ran for years and years and decades, and they would have little stickers and listings online of what stores were child-friendly, so parents would, those stores. So what else would you like for us to know about this wonderful work that you're doing?
Separate from, the misunderstandings of stay-at-home mothers, a little bit separate from, the Wikipedia page. I know Kathy's heard me say this before. I think some of the misunderstandings is that we're doing our nails. I've heard from 2 members of my family that I'm a lady of leisure. The idea is that we're privileged and, we're just so, this is our choice and not everybody has this choice. And I think that sadly, in part, that can be true. But I think that some of the misunderstandings also stem from the idea that there aren't many of us. And I think that there's actually a larger proportion of the population that is a stay-at-home mother or is transitioning into or out of becoming a stay-at-home mother. Because one of the things that we talked about in the Wikipedia entry is the definition of someone who works, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is someone who works a single hour a week. If someone made art and sold that art on Etsy and did that 1 hour a week, suddenly that person is counted statistically as a working parent. When maybe they did that at 3 a.m. while they're breastfeeding, and most of the time that they're awake, they are a parent first and foremost. And that was one of the really important pieces of the Wikipedia entry to talk about, are the implications of stay-at-home mothers being undercounted by official statistics like from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
And isn't this the statistic you said that some of the paragraphs that explained it further had already been removed?
Yes, so there were kind of 2 pieces to the Wikipedia entry in this section. One that was basically explaining what I just said. And then there was a second part that said, here are the implications when stay-at-home mothers are undercounted. They're not thought of in policy, they're misrepresented in the media. They're not seen as a force to be reckoned with, a force to cater to. And I think that, Kathy can speak to this too, about all of the implications when you don't have numbers behind you to show how prominent you are as a demographic in this country.
Right. So when we were pretty careful, we thought about what we said. After the explanation about the statistics and the way the Department of Labor measures employed persons, employed mothers, and we said that for decades, the statistics have been widely misused to imply that all working mothers are employed full-time and in need of all-day childcare and other policies crafted especially for them. So when you look at the statistics on employed mothers, it includes the mothers who are working only a few hours in the week that they were surveyed. So it's based on a survey of what people are doing in a particular week. And it also includes mothers who have a child who's 16. And if that mother is working, and then you use that statistic that includes those mothers of teenagers, and you use that statistic in an article where you're talking about mothers of infants, it's very misleading. They don't need full-time childcare for a 16-year-old. So it inflates the the call for like, oh, all these mothers are working and we don't have enough childcare for all their children. But if you're using children under the age of 18, that's not really a very realistic way of depicting what it is that families need. So it's also, what happens is you're ignoring the families who are maybe tag teaming. Maybe the parents are working different hours and they're caregiving for the children themselves because they prefer to do it that way, or because the child has some special needs, or because they are living on a farm in a rural area where it's not practical to be driving back and forth and making extra trips to access childcare. And those families they deserve support for the care they're giving their child. So this is our campaign for inclusive family policies, which we started in 2002. I forget the year that we started it. It's been a long time that we've said we need inclusive family policies where the care for the child is supported and you trust parents. You let parents make the decision about how they're going to provide that care for the child instead of coming up with a one-size-fits-all solution that a lot of families don't want. And when you survey parents of young children, the Bipartisan Policy Center did this in 2021. Now, it was coming out of the pandemic, so there were more parents caring for their children than in non-pandemic times. But they surveyed parents of infants and young children, so under the age of 5, and they said, what's your preference for care? And only under 40% of parents said that they would prefer either a child care center or a family daycare home for their children. The rest of them wanted either part-time preschool and then home with the parent the rest of the time, or having a parent at home, either themselves or their spouse, or care by grandparents. And all of those things have costs to them. So why are we only supporting one kind of care for children? And why are we not trying harder to let parents do the kind of care that they prefer?
What is the answer to that question? Why aren't we valuing and counting? You know, if we're a capitalist culture and we supposedly like to engineer all these measures, it doesn't seem like we're really measuring the right things the right way.
No, we don't think so. I mean, the care of children is not measured in the GDP if it's done by a parent. And, Willow read Ann Crittenden's book, The Price of Motherhood, and quoted her in the Wikipedia article where she said, if a nurse is feeding a baby, that's counted as work, and it's paid. But if the mother is feeding the baby, that's non-work and it's just invisible in the economy, in the economic measures. So when the GDP was set up, the men who set it up decided they weren't going to count the work that women did in the home. They also didn't count the work that was done by women of color. A lot of the housekeeping services that were done originally were not counted in the GDP. That's why I'm so excited about this book by Premila Nadasen, who's a professor at Barnard, as she goes into the whole history of care and how care has been extracted from people over the whole history of the United States. And at this point, and she talks about the same things we're talking about with our campaign for inclusive family policies, is that capitalists have an interest in convincing the government to pay for care services because they are going to make money. They're going to set up these businesses that provide caregiving services to families, and they're going to get paid to do it. So when you hear the words care economy, it doesn't mean that it's going to help the people who are doing unpaid care. It's really that care economy words are used to design paid caregiving services, and it's framed in a way that it's relieving the burden of care from women. And I saw these exact words. I don't have it in front of me right at the moment, but Melinda Gates has a big effort she convinced venture capitalists to get together $50 million to push for a care economy. And on the website where she was convincing the capitalists to do this, she said it's a great market opportunity. And she also said it's a good thing to do because it relieves women of the burden of caregiving. So when you frame caregiving as only a burden, and you're framing motherhood as only a burden, you are missing out on what a lot of women intuitively want to do. And I'm not saying everybody, or this is like the thing that everybody has to do, but when we look to Daphne DeMarnoff on this, and she wrote Maternal Desire about how there's a refusal to acknowledge that many mothers want to care for their babies. They want to spend time with them. They want to nurture them. It's important to them. And there was also a motherhood study done by Enola Aird about 10 or 12 years ago, where they just surveyed all mothers, and they didn't make any distinctions between at-home mothers and working mothers, or ask people about their employment situation. And they surveyed them about what they thought about motherhood. They found that the vast majority of women said it was the most important thing that they did. I'd like to talk to Melinda Gates sometime. I'd like to have a word with Melinda Gates.
Well, this book, Care, actually goes into the capitalist intentions for a new child care economy, and who's going to really be exploited when that engine gets going. So.
And she says that the policies are being designed for professionals, for people in professional jobs who want to be in their job and pursue a career and have their children in care. And they're not designed for everybody, or for parents who have other preferences. And of course, the caregivers are not paid well, right? And I always said this too about my husband worked for a big corporation, and so they were always on the working mothers list of great corporations that have all these great benefits for their employees. But I went with him to the exercise room for a while, and I got to know some of the people who maintained the exercise room and cared for it. And one of them was pregnant. And I was chatting with her one day, and she was back at work within 2 weeks of having that baby, because she was not an employee of this corporation. She was an employee of a small company that maintained the exercise room. And so, that was just for me a reminder of how much inequity there is, and how those awards for best companies is just, and it also, they didn't necessarily have policies that were helping the families who had an at-home parent, either an at-home mother or an at-home father. My husband's company had a different company he worked for had policies where childcare policies. But I was at home with my kids. I could pay a babysitter for 2 hours so that I could go to the dentist, because there was no money for that. The corporation was not supporting that. So he was an employee. He had children, but unless we put them in full-time childcare, there was no support.
So I've done an interview with Joan Williams, who founded the Work-Life Law Center in California, and this is like 25 years ago she founded it, but the interview is recent, and she says our models for employment are based on toxic masculinity. And the studies around women working say even when women are pursuing regular jobs or a career path, or the women who are floating back and forth, they hide the fact that they have children at home that may need them. Because and this is an article you can Google. I just read it this morning. It's talking about a study of what's happening with women trying to go back to work even after the pandemic, when 2 million women left the workplace to care for their children. She is saying, you have to hide the fact that you have children, and then you have to appear to be 100% committed to productivity and showing up and having that. This is the toxic masculinity model for employees. That is just normal. It's normalized now here in America. So So there's a lot that has been written about that, and the Work-Life Law Center does talk about this from a perspective of legal rights for women in the workplace who are pregnant or breastfeeding. And they have lots of resources on their website. I'll just throw that out there. And I'll try to remember to put that here where we have this interview, as well as all the wonderful resources that you all are bringing over at Family and Home Network.
Did you
So,
see there was a recent article about employees pushing back on the return to work, the people who are saying you have to return to the office,
yes.
and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people are pushing back on that. So that'll be interesting to see how that comes out.
I think this is really great to take on redefining language. I'm going to combine discussion on motherhood and quantum physics for a minute to say how David Bohm says language is everything. It is the way we set up our reality and the constructs we believe in and give weight to. That's how our story is going to go. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to redefine this phrase. I wonder, I'm thinking about mothers like Willow who are really in the thick of it, to be able to show other mothers and other women who are considering going into motherhood, there is value in this work, and there is great, deep reward in this work. It just may not be, as you were saying, Kathy, reflected back to you from the GDP or the Labor Statistics Board or
Social Security, because mothers don't get any Social
That's
Security.
right, or Social Security.
That's something that Congress could change, if they
That
want.
could be done. That could be done. That should be done. Do you all talk about Renne Isers' work?
We have not talked about it a lot. I've read some of her work. You introduced us to it, and I've read some, and I've been in touch with her a little bit. Actually, she's saying that she told me she read our article, and she had a positive response to, sent me a positive message about it, and said, she'd like to talk a little more about violence, women and violence. And it's interesting because one of the people that I think will cite when we go back and try to restate some of the consequences of the misuse of statistics, we need to cite that, because we said it and we referred to the chapter that the founders of our organization wrote back in the late 80s, early 90s. The editors took that out because they said it was too much essay-like. So we need to cite it. But Lisa Brush is a scholar at the University of, I think she's in Minnesota. And I cited a book of hers called Gender and Governance back in like 10 years ago when I was studying. She said that the focus on working mothers, all of the academic focus on working mothers has really harmed women's other interests and issues that are really crucial to women, like violence and poverty. So we're going to do a little more work on that and find a citation and restate that in the Wikipedia article, because that's one of the consequences of this focus on working mothers and advancing working mothers in the workplace and measuring everything by career advancement, is that, and ignoring at-home mothers, because you're ignoring that other work that women do that's important to women, that's important to society, and you're ignoring the problems that women have in this dominant culture, which is what Renne is talking about, the dominance culture that's not about partnership.
And she also has the Social Wealth Index, which does measure caregiving and the value of caregiving, the value of women and nurturers in particular to the economy, which is left out. So she redefines, and she wrote the book, The Real Wealth of Nations, which is also centered around the invisible and unacknowledged caregiving that is the engine for capitalism.
Yeah. So we have a lot of reading to do. I actually have that book here. Part of it.
There it is. That's it. That's the book.
My Post-it notes. Yeah, I feel like we need to be. There's a bunch of books that we need to be reading, and this is another one that I'm looking forward to reading, I haven't gotten to it, called The Three Mothers, How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation. And we cited her, it's by Anna Malika Tubbs, and she did a TED Talk. And we cited her TED Talk in the Wikipedia article. So I'm really excited I've read a little bit of this book, but I'm really excited to read more about it. Mothers, like she says, shape the nation, shape the culture that we have. And we need to lean into the mothering, the nurturing part of things. And like Darsha's showing us what nestedness is. So for people who need to have the science before they can, follow their intuition and allow themselves to let go of some of the cultural pressures of achievement and, making more money, it's great to have the science. And I wish we had it years ago when, we would get phone calls at our office. Sometimes I remember being in the office when the woman who answered the phone got off the phone and just said, "Oh my gosh." It was a woman whose family, both she and her husband earned good incomes. And she had a new baby and she's crying on the phone. She said, "I didn't know how I would feel about my baby until I had them," which we heard all the time from women. And she said, "I know we can make it on one income for a couple of years. And I really want to do this. And my husband doesn't want me to because he has this 5-year plan and he wants me to go back to work. And I can't convince him that I don't want to go back to work." So what could we tell her at that point? We didn't have Darsha's work. We didn't have a lot of science. The scientists were still fighting over this childcare study that the National Institutes of Health did about what's childcare's effect on children. And, there just wasn't as much information about how children develop when they're very young and what they need. And we were shaking our heads and saying, why isn't this a feminist issue? That this woman doesn't have the ability or the power. And it was partly the relationship it was all a relationship, of course. But how is that not seen as a problem?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that coming up on Kindred here shortly. We have a new writer, Jessica Weppo, who has worked her dissertation in motherhood studies and is going to take us down to the roots of what happened mythologically, culturally, that motherhood is facing erasure now. So it's going to be an interesting journey with her. I look forward to welcoming her.
That's
okay.
great.
Willow, do you have anything else you'd like for us to know before we go?
Well, the one thing I want to share about the Wikipedia entry that I don't think has been said yet is that I hope that women and men come to this Wikipedia page and feel empowered. I hope they see it as a doorway to all of this information that I'm actively learning, that the two of you are actively talking about. There are so many citations. There's so many nuggets to say what I'm doing is of value here. I'm not the only one who is noticing how I feel. I think that I really hope that lots of moms come to this page and can use it as a doorway for their own empowerment.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for all of your time you spent putting this together, and for Family and Home Network holding their space for 40 years now. And I will say, if you're listening, you can find more information and resources at kindredmagazine.org. And you can find Kathy and Willow at the Family and Home Network at
It's familyandhome.org.
familyandhome.org. Okay, great. All right. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.